Welcome to Being Curious podcast show, proudly supported by Moss Skin, a UK-based skincare line infused with sea moss. Good morning, Hazel. It is lovely to see you, and thank you for agreeing to be on Being Curious with Counselling Reflections. So, for our listeners, and I suppose it's just a bit about yourself before we start our conversation. What would you like us to know about you? How did you get here?
Oh, I've had a real journey in life. No different to anybody else, though. I'm not trying to say I'm worse off or anything than anyone else. It's, life is a test, isn't it, for many of us? But I believe all of our experiences create the person we are today, and we go through them for a reason. I truly am a believer in that. So I don't know where you'd like me to start.
I don't know. I suppose maybe the beginning, like your upbringing. How was your upbringing? How was your life?
So I grew up with a single mum. My dad and her parted ways when I was 2. And he's always suffered with mental health and addiction issues. So I never had any contact with my father throughout my whole childhood. So it was just me and my mum on a council estate. She was a mum, sometimes worked, sometimes not. We scraped by and we survived.
You're saying that, but I wonder what that was like to kind of grow up not having dad around and growing up with mum and did mum protect you from the struggles that she was facing as a single parent? Because I can imagine it wasn't easy.
I think like any single mum, and I'm one myself, I think like any single parent, I shouldn't just say mum, single parent, you do, protect you want to protect your child from seeing the struggle, and I was blessed with beautiful grandparents, and they were a massive help and part of my life. And whatever my mum couldn't give, they did. And, I can't look back and say that I was without anything. And the biggest thing I had in my life was love, and you can't put money on that. So
no, you can't. What was it about your grandparents' love that you just kind of knew that they were there? Because often some people, they don't have that privilege of having grandparents around, or they don't have that relationship with their grandparents for whatever reason.
My grandparents would pick me up every weekend and take me to their house. And we would do, I believe my grandparents, I owe them for everything, all the goodness in my heart, all my community spirit, which we'll come to. I did inherit a lot of their ways, and, they were always kind. They were always there. They always had time for me, and I can remember my nan's cooked breakfasts. I can remember us going, to do community fetes and, all sorts of different things as a child, but everything with the smile on my face. They gave me real love and real happy memories.
So your grandparents were also part of the community doing stuff as a participant, or actually active in the community supporting others?
So my granddad was this is my mum's parents, because I didn't see any of my dad's side of the family until I was an adult. But my mum's parents, they're the ones who I had regular contact with as a child. And my granddad was a local councillor. And he was always doing, he was always participating in the local election stuff. And, he was always out there leafleting, and, I used to go with him. And, there's all sorts of little things that he did in the community. And they used to do like jumble sales, community fetes and, things like that. And I was always involved helping them, and I loved it.
Oh, wow. What happened kind of growing up in terms of like primary school, secondary school? What was life like for you then?
So, primary school, I went to the local primary school, The only thing I can think that stands out always, and I'm not saying that, in particularly I felt different, but looking back, I was the only black child in my community, in my school. I think there was one other in my junior school, and certainly only one or two others in my senior school. So, but my junior school, I had a great time. I had lots of friends, still speak to those friends today. Senior school, I became a rebel, and
yeah. Why did you become a rebel?
Well, I just started hanging out with the naughty people. I found that exciting. Senior school bored me, and the senior school that I went to ended up getting closed down because the education there was appalling. So as I said, we grew up on a council estate, and this senior school was on the council estate. It was quite a rundown council estate, but it created my childhood, made me very streetwise. And unfortunately, a lot of the kids, they either came from troubled homes, or, they just because of the lack of boundaries, discipline, etc. in the school, lots of us were naughty. We really were.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a couple of things that you've kind of mentioned. Having the fact that you're the only black child, primary, secondary school, and and I wonder what that must have felt like.
I think that might be part of why I was a rebel as well, because staying in with the cool gang that everybody looked up to, and it stopped. I suppose it stopped me being bullied in a way. Yeah. I did face some racism in senior school. There was a couple of incidents that I had with so-called rebel friends, but usually it was because when they were bored, they would turn their fun to me, because they wanted everybody was looking for everybody was working on an ego, and if you weren't making someone think, oh my God, they're cool, or oh my God, they're hard, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was. Oh, well, nobody's looking at me.
It's interesting. I'm listening to you, Hazel, and I think we've had a similar kind of educational upbringing, where being the only kind of black, me and my brother were the only black children in primary school and secondary school. And for me, I grew up in a children's home, so I had all the rebel children as my extended family. So that was kind of interesting in navigating kind of race with young people. Did you feel like did you feel like you could go home and speak to your mum or your grandparents about what was going on? Did you have that opportunity, or speak to the teachers?
What do you mean about what? What aspect of it? The racism?
Yeah, if that was, I know you said it didn't happen that often. But was you able to have that conversation?
It happened from friends, so-called friends, if anything. And as I said, they turned their joke to me when they were bored and weren't getting attention from people.
Yeah.
But to be fair, I learned to laugh it off. And it was from then that I probably became accepting to being abused. And that will, we'll talk about that later on. But I was accepting this behaviour because they were my friends and I wanted to hang around with them. So I didn't see it as a problem. So I never went home and shared it or said anything, because I never saw it as a problem. It's like, oh, it's okay, they're just making fun of me. They don't mean it because they're my friends.
So you kind of internalised it and accepted it, and
I did.
That set you up for later on kind of abusive experience. During, I suppose, then that's kind of school. What happened at college? Did you go to college or university?
No, I didn't go to college. I left school. A lot more happened at school. I mean, with that rebel gang became addiction. In school. I was using solvents at a very early age. We all got into solvent abuse at around 13, 14. I found that really, really cool. We were all out there getting high while I was supposed to be in school. Lots of people smoked weed in school, and drugs were being sold. It was, it was that kind of school. when it came to being 15, getting into my last year of school, I just thought, you know what, I've had enough of this. I'm not getting anything out of it. I found myself a boyfriend that was older than me, and I thought he had access to his dad's flat, and we used to stay there quite often. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to leave. And I did. I walked into the school gate one day, I thought this isn't for me, and I turned around and left. I never did any GCSEs or anything. You know, not something I'm proud of, not something that I'm portraying to the young.
Sorry for cutting your flow. Because you talked about kind of substance use and experimenting, and at that age, young people don't think they're going to go into addiction, do they? It's
Absolutely
usually
not. No.
Experimenting and just having fun, but it's also opportunity as well. And by the sounds of it, in terms of your school, but it also, just listening to you this morning, it feels that you weren't being challenged enough in terms of
I had no rules, no discipline, nothing in place. Yeah. I ran off my own will all my life.
And then at 15, you decided
that's it. I'm not going to school no more, and I'm gonna go and live with my boyfriend, which was a fantastic idea at the time. But we had no money, and I had my national insurance number, so I thought, I'm going to get a job, and I got a job.
What was your first job?
My first job, I worked in Percy Ingle Bakers in Basildon, in by the market, and I used to serve cakes and bread, and I loved it.
Did you? And how long did you stay there for?
Probably about 6 months or so. Then I moved on to a supermarket in Basildon, where the Asda is now. It used to be Sabre Centre. I worked in there.
Yeah.
And
did that feel like earning money and, you know, being independent?
I've always been fiercely independent. I've always been, I don't need anyone. I don't, you know, a man, my mum, nobody. I don't rely on anyone. I'm fiercely independent and always have been. I'd rather go without than depend on someone.
Where do you think you got that messaging from, that I have to be independent? Is it in the genes that the women?
I think it is in the genes. Obviously, my mum brought me up on her own, and you know, I never saw her needing my nan and granddad. She probably did, but I never saw that. You know, I never knew that. So I only ever knew independence, I suppose, from my mum. Yeah, and I've had a lot of strong women around me in my life, and I suppose, you know, my grandmother being the next one. So although she wasn't single, you know, she was a very strong and independent lady. So that's what I grew into. So
you got your own place to stay and live.
Well, it wasn't our own place; it was his dad's house.
It's his dad's house. You got your own money.
And it all went wrong.
And it all went wrong. Tell me why it all went wrong then.
It all went wrong because his dad wanted a flat back, so we ended up going to live in Southend in a homeless shelter. But we ended up breaking up there, and this was a couple of years. You know, by this time I was 17, and we broke up. And lo and behold, I ended up getting with the owner of the homeless place.
And were they a bit older than you? A lot older than you?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the owner of the homeless place that we lived in saw, you know, when I used to speak to him, he used to say to me, "You've got a good brain on you. I'd like you to come and work for me, running my office," which I did. And eventually we developed a relationship.
How do you feel about that in terms of your, you know, meeting someone, you've broken up? Did you want to break up with your first boyfriend?
Yeah, we were more like best friends. You know, we were more like best friends. There was no real, not for me anyway, there was no real love there. You know, he was my best friend and that was it. It was dead as far as the relationship was concerned.
You were ready to
I mean, it didn't move in it wasn't like straight away that I got with my partner, the partner that I had who owned the hotel, but you know, it just developed, and there was an attraction there, and I suppose people would look at it and say, well, she didn't have her dad around, so she went and got with an older man. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was on both sides. You know, what attracted him to a younger person, what attracted me to an older man. But we were together for 8 years and we had a child. So
that is a significant amount of time, isn't it?
Yeah.
there's lots of reasons why people get together, isn't it? But in some ways, people say that women tend to go for more security, and so therefore,
I definitely had security from, he made sure we had everything. I never lacked anything, and I've never been a money orientated person ever, because I didn't come from money. I don't look for money, so some people, because he had money, some people would say, oh, look at a young girl with an older man because he's got money, and some people would say about him, look at him with a pretty young girl on his arm because he's insecure at an older age. Whatever it was,
what was the age difference between you both?
Sorry?
What was the age difference between you both?
35 years.
35 years. So it's a significant difference. But then also, given what you said earlier about your life at school, you were really quite mature then in terms of leaving school at 15.
I'd run a home from 15. I've always had a good head on my shoulders when it came to thinking. And I was running his hotel, a homeless hotel, 56 rooms at 17. With a contract to the local authority. So, and, I thank him for that opportunity. It shaped my whole life and career today. But, he was 35 years older than me. We had a daughter together. As I said, 8 years I was with him. Yeah, I felt older when I was with him. And when it wasn't until we broke up that I felt young again. But that doesn't mean to say I was unhappy. For the time that I was.
What was the relationship like for you? It sounds like a really positive experience, was it? Or did abuse come in then?
I tell you now, it was definitely an experience.
It was an experience.
Yeah, it wasn't an awful one or anything like that.
Yeah.
But he was a man, he was a very, very strong character. And he was a man who he could turn his hand to anything. He was, and I say was because he's now dead, but he was a businessman. He was, he could talk in a room. Everyone would sit silent if they heard him speaking. He
sounds very charismatic.
He was very charismatic, very, very. He was, he worked out, he looked after himself. When I'm talking about a man that was 35 years older than me, he wasn't old and decrepit. He was fit. He had muscles. Do you know what I mean? He looked after himself, and he had a lot going for him. However, he was a ladies' man, and
he was a ladies' man.
Yeah. So he led a double life with another lady, and that's what finished us, But to the end, we were friends.
In all of the 8 years, was he with that other person?
Yes.
He was?
Yes.
I can't even imagine where you go with that, but how did you find out, if you don't mind me asking, or how did you deal with it?
Well, there's a lot more to the story, and I thought we could go on all day. I'm going to cut it short. So somebody told me without realising who I was, and that was it. I ended it there, and then it's not as clean cut as that. There's a lot more to the story, but some of it I don't really want to share on air because of my daughter, so I'll leave it at that, there was a double life, I found out. And, but we was, after we were still friends. Was you able to work with him still? Because during that time, no, so in the meantime, he sold the hotel, and I was kind of just being mum, really. And he was looking after us financially. So, the hotel had gone long before we broke up.
What did you do next? Because I assume that, it's not always easy to end a relationship, even if you've kind of now found out someone's had a double life. And I really understand, that actually
couple of years, to be honest. Obviously that's going to give you trust issues. I was on my own for a good couple of years after, and I then went on to meet my son's dad. I lived on, I moved into a privately rented property on my own. I was quite happily single for a good couple of years. And to be honest, I was enjoying life. I'd been with an older man for some time. I think I need to say what I was missing, because it relates to a lot more of my story. So he went to prison for drug. He turned to drugs because his hotels weren't making enough money, and he went to prison for that for 14 years. And I visited him in prison and stayed loyal to him for 5.
5 of the 8 years, or
5, they got 14 years and he done 7.
Yeah.
And it was probably about 4 years of it, sorry. And I was visiting with my daughter and staying loyal and everything. And one time I went out with my friends to this nightclub. Didn't go out hardly ever when I was with him. But I went out and they said, this guy said to me that he'd just come out of the same prison. And I said, oh, okay, do you know this guy? I said his name. And he said, yeah, how fun is he? His baby mum comes up to visit one week, and this other woman comes up the next week. And that's how he lives his sentence. And I said, the baby mum.
Sorry. So you're out minding your own business, chatting to your guy, and he says, oh, yes, I've just come out of prison and my mate is this guy. And how fun is it that his baby mother comes up 1 week and another woman comes up the next?
Well. Yeah.
I can't imagine where you'd go with that, because to be fair, I was absolutely gutted, that I'd waited for this man. Not only that, I've missed out another huge part. I actually went to prison for this man as well. So for part of that sentence that he got, there was a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice in it, on a document that was, a falsified document that I helped collect from an accountant. And, that came out in court that it was falsified. And, I got 6 months in prison for perverting the course of justice on his case. How did you do that? Because I assume you're a young mum. You're with someone that you believed and trust, and unfortunately they turned to drugs. By the sounds of it, stress.
Don't get me wrong, he wasn't always into drugs. This is a 50-year-old man who found it because, it made up the money that he was losing at the hotels, and it was going to be...
Sentencing is because he supplied, then, is it?
Because he was top of the chain. They saw him as top of the chain. Remember, this is a guy with multiple property and, nice car and everything else. So they saw him as being top of the chain, which is why he received such a large sentence.
And then for you, I assume you're quite young still, and yes. The things that you were asked to do you think you understood what you was asked to do?
I did it out of love and loyalty, because there's two things that I am very much so. And whether it was right or wrong that I was asked, whether it was right or wrong that I did it, it was, we can't change any of that that's happened. And that's moulded me into the human being I am today, and I have no resentments anymore about it.
Do you have resentments then? What kind of resentments do you have?
I had massive resentments. That's where my, that world is where my cocaine usage started, my own cocaine usage. That world is, took me away from my daughter for 3 months. But, you can sit and look back and be resentful at many, many things in your life. And where does it get you? You know, you have to look at your part in these situations. And I wasn't a baby. I was young, but I wasn't a baby. I wasn't being forced. I wasn't being hands behind my back. I had my own mind. I made my own decisions. So I don't hold resentments anymore. But for a long time I did.
That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because lots of people would have said it's a lot easier to blame other people for the choices that we make.
It is a lot easier.
And even the smallest of choices, isn't it? That we can kind of step away and say, actually, you know, this happened, I was coerced. You know, part of it could be coercion because you were, although mature in many ways, but still young in many ways. And then when you then look at, I suppose, your experiences of an older person kind of identifying this is a younger person I can work with, even in love, you know, you can see why it's hard to make different choices. Yeah.
But as I said, you know, I've got a beautiful daughter and I had, you know, I was happy, and he moulded many good things of my life. You know, he was the person He was the person who got me driving. He took me to Jamaica to see my roots. You know, he got me in touch with my dad and that side of the family. You know, there's so many good things that came out of being in that relationship as well. You know, so...
that is lovely. Complicated, but, you know, really lovely.
My whole life is nothing but complicated.
I know that you said, you know, like early in your life, you know, you kind of spoke about or alluded to earlier around kind of trauma or kind of abuse in some way. And it started off with your school friends, like turning against you when you didn't have anyone else.
Yeah.
Then
so after I left... After I left my daughter's dad and I was single for a good couple of years and, you know, hit the rave scene and I was just out there living life. You know, I'd been indoors, being a mum, and running my own household since I was 15. You know, now I wanted to live life, you know, and I really lived, you know, and I was out every weekend. You know, I was in the rave scene, and yes, that involved, you know, drug taking. I was happy. I was, you know, in my own little world, I was happy. But, yeah. I'm
listening to you, and you kind of said, oh, I was happy in my own little world. Was it because after being in, you know, having been responsible, doing the right thing, then you kind of after a couple of years decided I'm going to live my best life?
I just wanted to be young because that's something I'd felt that I'd never been.
What age was you then? What age was you?
I was about 23 then. Then I just started living, really living. And as I said, I was happy in my own. Looking back now, you know, now I'm at this part of my life, I realised I wasn't really, you know, I might have thought I was happy, but all I was doing was just covering up every single emotion. You know, that was like that when I found out he was seeing someone else, that was like you know, that hurt me massively. You know, when he got 14 years in that dock, I sobbed and screamed like a baby in that room because my whole world was being snatched from me. I loved him, you know, and, you know, me being in prison away from my daughter as well as him was huge. You know, it was a huge thing to happen to me in my young life. So having that betrayal hit me, you know, like it did, my rebel come back out of me, you know, and I went out and I rebelled.
You just went off the rail, did you?
I did. And when he came out of prison, my daughter was with him all the time because obviously she wanted to catch up on lost years. And there I was, always out because I had the opportunity to. You know, I never had my son then, never had the opportunity. So I wasn't always being the best mother that I could be because I was masking emotions with drug taking, raving, alcohol. You know, that was like, when he got 14 years in that dock, I sobbed and screamed like a baby in that room because my whole world was being snatched from me. I loved him, you know, and, you know, me being in prison away from my daughter as well as him was huge. You know, it was a huge thing to happen to me in my young life. So having that betrayal hit me, you know, like it did, my rebel come back out of me, you know, and I went out and I rebelled.
I
etc., and not being there as a mother, but thinking it's okay, she's with her dad. They've got lost time to catch up on. Let me go out, let me be me, and living in self, which I now realise.
Did you, when you kind of, was it just recreational drug use then? Did you then start to form a habit?
I've used everything. And I never realised I had an issue with drugs. I never realised. I just thought I did them, like everybody else did. All of my friends.
So did it creep up on you? Because you started quite young, haven't you? You started about kind of earlier than 13? Did you drink?
About 13, I started using solvents. Yeah, I started using solvents about 13. I started using amphetamine when I was about 16 to lose weight, do the housework. Only little tiny bits. Didn't have any money. I spent £5 on a gram of amphetamine. Sometimes we'd have a little bit of a hash joint, me and my boyfriend that I moved in with at an early age. But again, we didn't hardly have any money. It wasn't until I started, that this world I was introduced to, and I'm not saying it was all my daughter's dad, it was the surroundings. There was a lot of cocaine. I didn't know about cocaine until then. Nobody I knew could afford cocaine. I didn't even like it at first. But then I was the one who didn't ever want the night to end. He'd go to bed and I'd go, oh, please, can you just leave me some? Things like that. So looking back now, I realise that the problem, I've always had a problem that I can't stop once I start. And so I'll progress more onto that. So I'll come to the part where I met my son's dad. So everyone warned me about him when I first met him, and I didn't believe a word of them because the stories that I heard were so far-fetched. That he'd tied a girl to a radiator, cut all her hair off, he'd thrown her child across the room. I just thought, where I come from, there's a lot of rumours. Yeah, there's a lot of gossip and there's a lot of rumours. So this guy was nice to me and my daughter, and and I liked him. And at the point I met him, I needed something to take me away from drugs. And
how old was you?
30 when I met him.
So at 30, you met him, and people said to you, hey, Hazel, look, this guy's not for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I didn't listen. And I went on to get pregnant by him very, very quickly. And at the time, I remember praying to God to take me away from the drug world that I was in. And I felt like this was my answer. This was the answer I needed. So the minute I saw 2 blue lines on a pregnancy test, I gave up. I gave up everything.
So for you, being pregnant was a way of stepping out of the scene, because you kind of valued having a healthy baby, and it was something.
Absolutely. And by the grace of God, I was able to, because let's face it, however you want to judge people, there are many addicts out there that cannot give up because they're pregnant. So by the grace of God, I was able to. And I went on to, we moved in together, etc. And it was all great for about 3 months. And about 4 months into my pregnancy, I started seeing a violent side to him. It started off with, one day I was brushing my hair and he grabbed the hairbrush from me and wrapped it around my head because he didn't like the way I spoke back to him. I was ironing a shirt one day and he came in and smashed the ironing board to bits. This was in the early parts of my pregnancy. There was always loads of sorries, tears, and I won't do that again. He was a heavy weed smoker as well, so he kind of blamed a lot on that. But as time went on, the violence got worse and worse.
And it's kind of interesting in terms of like perpetrators of violence, because people kind of say, oh, actually, it's because of the mental health or it's because of the addiction. But actually, you're making intentional choices. It's not about the addiction. It's not about the mental health within that.
Absolutely. And what I would say to any woman or man out there going through any of that. Never, ever take any excuse for that kind of behaviour, because there is none. You know, and I used to, because I am, and always have been, that person who wants to nurture and care for people. I've started taking him to doctors, you know, right, okay, we can fix this problem, because what I didn't want to do was be another single parent. I didn't want another broken family. I wanted my son to grow up with a mum and dad. So I thought, let me fix this. I can fix it. But it never did get fixed. It just got worse and worse.
How did you think you'd fix it? Did you think it was a mental health problem?
Yeah, I made doctor's appointments. You know, I tried to support him with cutting down weed. You name it, I did it. You know, but nothing worked, because it's not going to. This is what he does. This is
how long was you in this relationship, Hazel, for?
A good couple of years. Backwards and forwards. I was going. 1 minute I was with him, you know, then I was like, you know, it was awful. And, you know, I put my daughter went through all of that with me. You know, all right, she was at her dad's a lot, but that doesn't matter. She was still in the house many times. And whether she was there or not, she saw the effect it had on me, and that's had a massive effect on me.
I think women and men don't realise the impacts that domestic violence on the child. Even a baby could be next door sleeping and you're arguing with your partner, and the cortisol level could rise. So that's the stress hormone in the baby, yet the baby's sleeping. And so, and then you're recovering as a mum from the experience and tiptoeing, because it's a cycle.
Remember as well, you know, I was trying to have a baby. I was trying to carry a baby and be happy about a pregnancy, and all I kept doing was getting beaten up. You know, and trust me, I did nothing to I did everything I could not to aggravate that man. I walked around on eggshells. You know, I did everything for him, and you know, and tried my best, but nothing worked.
Did services get involved?
Yeah. So one time he, you know, some of the experiences, you know, I had were quite horrific, you know, and, you know, he's tied me up and peed all over me. You know, he's beat me where I've had to hold a cushion to my stomach so that the baby didn't get harmed. You know, I've had to run out of the house with no shoes on. And one time, you know, he pushed me out of the car while I was driving. You know, I was driving and I stopped because he started hitting me while I was driving. This is me heavily pregnant. And I undone my seatbelt and he actually pushed me out of the car. And I got up and I ran. And I ran to my grandmother's house, which was nearby. And just as I got to her doorstep, I fell and all my weight landed on my ankle and he was screaming in my face. And my nan came out and I asked her to call for an ambulance, which she did. And the ambulance came and I thought it was going to disappear, but he didn't. He stayed and he carried on screaming and shouting at me in front of that ambulance, and they called social services. And, you know, I'm not proud of this, but throughout the whole pregnancy and the time I was with him, you know, anytime anyone asked my daughter questions at school or her dad or anyone, I used to ask her to lie and cover it up because I was trying to mask what was going on.
And I don't know how the social services that you were involved in, and just for disclosure, I used to work in social services, and what I found as a connections personal advisor, what I found that often women were victim blamed, and that they carried the blame of ensuring that a perpetrator, whether it's a man or female, wasn't going to come into the house and not take responsibility. And so I found mums not really getting the support that they need, but then having to go through care proceedings or assessments during pregnancy can be really stressful.
Absolutely. So what happened was, when I was in the hospital, the nurses and doctors said to me, you know, want to speak to me on my own. And they said, is there anything I want to talk about? And I said, no, because I was forever covering it up, what happened with him. And I had a visit from social care, and I said, yeah, everything's fine. You know, we're over. We don't, you know, we don't have hardly anything to do with each other. He's just going to see the baby when he's born. You know, just fed him a load of lies. When I gave birth to my son, as soon as he was out, wrapped in a blanket, the door opened and social services walked in and said the dad had to leave. And from that point on, I was given an order to not let him see my son unsupervised.
That must have been absolutely devastating, but also and
I blamed them. You know, I was blaming them, saying, you've ruined the birth of my baby. You know, you've come in here, and because I was so brainwashed, you know, and couldn't see past the abuse. You know, because you're just constantly being told, I love you, you know, I'm so sorry, I'm not well, this, that and the other. You know, there's been times I could barely stand up. And this is all while I'm trying to carry a baby. You know, and, you know, it's...
Hazel, I am really appreciative that you feel that you are able to share this. And it feels uncomfortable to listen to what you went through, you know, and... no woman, no man should ever go through what you have gone through.
Absolutely not.
And so, you know, I'm glad that you're able to kind of look back and say, actually, you know, where I was kind of brainwashed and I wasn't able to make those decisions, because I think people would say, well, why don't you leave? You know, you should leave.
So anyone that's not been through abuse, and to be fair, anyone that's not been through addiction, anyone that's not been through any of it, will never be able to see why you were doing it. And people say, why did you put up with it? Why did you not tell someone? Why did you not leave? You're never going to be able to make anyone understand that unless you've lived it. And I lived it and I understand it. And trust me, when you're in that cycle, it's one of the hardest things to get out of. And I tried very hard to leave him. You know, I got, you know, I started saying, well, you can see the baby around your mum's house. And he just used to kick up the fuss all the time. And because he knew where we lived, he'd turn up at the house. I mean, I had a panic alarm put in my house for the police, and he'd turn up. I'd have to press that 20 times a day. You know, we had summertime where we could never open our windows because he'd jump through them. You know, my kids were living, even though my son can't remember, my daughter can remember every single second of it, you know, and my kids were living an awful life. I was a mess. You know, I had black eyes. I was anxious, you know, and again, you know, I turned to my addiction to get me through.
As a way of coping.
However you want to. Yeah. It's an excuse, because addicts use excuses. But my addiction clung to my traumas. And, you know, I was using
traumas. What do you mean by that?
Well, my addiction, you know, that I was using on those traumas, you know, whereas today, I'm not sitting in trauma. I've been helped to release that trauma, you know, to release the feelings I have around that trauma that will not make me then go on to pick up a drug on it. But yeah, I mean, I sat in my house alone many, many times, in my bedroom alone, and just used because the memories after I managed to get away, and the way I got away was I was shopping one day. You know, my best friend, who we'll go on to talk about in a moment, she had lung cancer, terminal. When she found out, it was too late, too far gone. And she was fighting that like a soldier. And she just wanted normal life. She didn't want anyone to pity her or anything like that. And she was with me throughout all of this domestic abuse, being my support network. And one day, me and her went shopping, and my son was actually with his dad and his mum on a contact visit. And he did not stop ringing my phone. And his mum rang up and said, look, I'm going to have to bring the baby back to you. Where are you? And I told her where I was, which is a supermarket near her house. And she came to the supermarket. she said she was going to bring the baby to the supermarket. The next thing I know, he walked through the door, and he was actually verbally attacking my daughter, who was with me, you know, because my daughter had got to the point, she was a teenager, she was a little rebel herself, you know, and she was had enough of him. You know, she's had enough of this man who's constantly abusing her mum. So she's saying things to him, he's saying things to her. And, you know, I saw this hand come up like he was about to strike my daughter. So I hit him, you know, to take the dairy from my daughter, because my daughter was about to be struck by this man in the middle of the supermarket. And he spun round and knocked me out. You know, he knocked me clean out off my... When I looked back at the CCTV, he took me off my feet and I landed smack bang on my face in the middle of the supermarket with shoppers screaming, kids screaming. And I remember opening my eyes and looking around, and everybody was just running around screaming.
And that's one of the most dangerous points as well, isn't it? That when a perpetrator strikes out in public, because often they want to do it in private. They're charismatic to other people, and in private they create hell. But you're at your most dangerous. You're at most danger when they do it in public. That they don't care. There's nothing going to stop them.
He didn't care. No. I mean, he went on and took an overdose after that. You know, self-pity, you know, whatever reason he took the overdose, he survived, and he went to prison for 3 years for what he'd done to me there. And I decided that was enough. You know, I couldn't live this life anymore. I can't live in that area, my hometown where I came from. I can't live there because this man's always going to know where I live. So I asked for a move out of the area. And that was 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, I moved to this house where I've lived in complete and utter isolation ever since. Nobody knows where I live because it feels safer not to tell them. I don't, you know, my daughter knows, my mum knows, my brother knows. And I think there's one or two of my friends that eventually got to know. But I've kept myself very private, very isolated, so that man never finds me.
Do you feel let down by the systems around us to protect us? I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking
there's a lifetime restraining order against me and my daughter. You know, he's not allowed near us for the rest of our life. But yeah, I mean, I do think
very rare, isn't it?
That is very rare to get a lifetime one.
It just shows you how violent he was.
He's up there on the most violent offenders list. You know, domestic abuse orders. He's gone on to commit further domestic abuse crimes to other women. You know, thankfully I'm away from him. Thankfully I've never seen him in those 10 years, and I really hope I never do. You know, unfortunately my son has lost a father because of it. Doesn't have that, but you know, it's unfortunate, you know, because he doesn't. You know, my daughter is mentally scarred from what she's witnessed in her life, you know, and he's managed to not be. So, but at the same time, what I feel let down by is that I was moved to this house and left. That was it. Everybody thought, that's okay, she's moved.
Yeah.
She's fine now.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting that kind of happens, isn't it? That actually victims of abuse are often shipped out of the area with less support and environments around them to protect them in some ways and to get on with it.
Yes. Yeah. And I had no counselling. I had no support, nothing. And because I wanted to live in total isolation, I've gone and visited my friends, but this house has been a massive, massive trigger to my addiction as well. You know, because again, addiction will feed off of you being isolated, you sitting in trauma. You know, it wants that dark spot that you've got, you know, and you know, I kept reverting back to wanting to be high, you know, and if it wasn't high, it was busy, because I can't sit on them thoughts. I cannot.
There's a couple of models, isn't there, around addiction, but the one that I kind of, when I think about when I'm listening to you today, It's called kind of looking at opportunity, attachment, and trauma. And they're the things that drive addiction.
Absolutely.
The fact that you didn't have psychotherapy, nothing. And I would invite you to, even though, by all accounts, you sound a really resilient woman. Sometimes it is really useful to work with someone who specialises in DV.
Yes, the trouble is finding them. The trouble is, unless you're going to pay for it, there isn't anything, especially not in this area.
I do know people, if you ever want to do that work, I do know people who are able to do that work with you.
Oh, that's brilliant. So what I did start doing was what's called breaking the... I mean, I did the Freedom Programme with... so I've done that, and that teaches, for those that don't know, that teaches you about... the perpetrator, the signs, the warning signs, that sort of thing. And I did it in a group. I did it in face to face, and everybody thought they'd been seeing the same man, because they've all got the same traits and what to look out for. And just recently, I've done one that's called Breaking the Cycle, because again, I was still living in the trauma, and I just thought, let me keep busy. Keeping busy was a key to my me not remembering, me blocking all of this out and just putting it to one side. And it doesn't matter because it's over there. Let me just keep busy, and then I don't think about anything. And it's okay, but that's not okay. That's not okay. And I was told years ago, if you do not counsel your trauma, it will catch up with you later on. And being a woman of 45 now, obviously, I've started perimenopausal symptoms, and I've found that has heightened, a lot of my emotions and stuff. A couple of years ago, I was really suffering. I was really suffering with all of my emotions and trauma.
I am so glad that we're talking about the menopause and perimenopausal symptoms, because one of those is anxiety and depression. And you might have been able to kind of feel normal, and all of a sudden, because of the changes, it's the drop of hormones or the fluctuation of hormones that create it. But most people, and I'm a trauma therapist, most people come and do the work late. So it's not unusual for women and men who've experienced difficult lived experiences to start doing the work in their 50s and their 40s. When it's almost as if you're resilient enough, or you have to do it because actually this is it. You want to change. You've alluded to the fact that your friend was dying of lung cancer, and things have started to change. And this is the real story, isn't it? This is the
this is where this is. So my friend was dying of lung cancer, supported me through domestic violence, bless her heart, and from when she died, I'd been living in this house a couple of years when she died. She actually insisted on her terminal illness to come over and help wallpaper, bless her heart. Wow. That's how she was. She said to me from when she found out she was terminally ill, don't you dare feel sorry for me. I don't want self-pity. I want to be treated as normal, and I want to just get on with it. You never know what's around the corner, breakthroughs in medicines, etc., etc. She literally changed her whole diet down to her toothpaste, everything. She researched how she could help herself, and she fought cancer to the very end. She was the most strongest, bravest, empowering woman I've ever known. And
how did you witnessing her journey help you in your recovery?
Well, she gave me, for me, a woman fighting cancer like she did, having to break the news to her 2 young children that she was going to die, and that who would they like to live with when she passed. The most heartbreaking conversation I've ever heard in my life. And she was out there. She was fundraising. She was organising events. She was doing walks. She was whatever she could to support cancer research in Macmillan, she did it. Right till her dying day. You know, she was amazing. She was amazing. So in her memory, on one of her anniversaries, I held a supposedly one-off event in my local pub to raise money for Macmillan. And she took the reins of that because that's her thing. So I believe her as my higher power today on that project. She's made it what it is today because everybody is hearing about it. Raving for a Reason, it's called. Everybody's hearing about it.
Raving for a Reason.
Raving for a Reason. Yeah, Raving for a Reason. Music-related events to help charities and individuals. And people said it was so good that they wanted me to do one for them and this cause and that cause. And I really enjoyed doing it. You know, I got great pleasure out of organising it. And the people that came along to help me, the DJs, the MCs, the equipment, I never had any of this stuff. You know, I've always loved music. I've always been a raver, you know, and I've always been a community person that somebody wants to help everybody. So it just all fitted together like a glove. You know,
you are minding your own business. You decide to put on an event at your local pub. And then before you know it, everyone's... what was it about that day, that event, that evening? What was it about? Was it the music? Was it about the DJs?
It's the community spirit. It's the music, the community spirit, the raffles that we have, you know, just everybody enjoying themselves and all for a great reason, you know. And the support and love I've got, in particularly from the drum and bass genre, you know, has been amazing. You know, we try and incorporate other genres into our events, but trust me, I do not see the love and support from any other genre so far than I have done from drum and bass. And I've had big artists.
What is it about drum and bass? Because I kind of understand.
The community in drum and bass is amazing. You know, the support.
And it also spreads over different generations, doesn't it? You've got the oldies and the youngies all in the same.
You have. Yeah. And as I said, I've had big artists come and support this, you know, and I'm so blessed. Little old me, you know, a little old me, single mum, been through all of this stuff in my life, just grew up on a council estate. And all I've done is just do one-off party for my best friend's memory. And here I am, several, you know, I've probably raised in the region of, it's getting on for about 20,000 now for individuals and charities. Wow. You know, the best one for me was last year. I two local girls from my hometown, both teenagers, fighting cancer teenage cancer. And we did an event for them, and we were, one of them was a bit, you know, she didn't want to be in the limelight. That's fine, you know, but she wasn't very girly like the other little girl. So we managed. She kind of put up a lot of barriers, one of the girls, but we still was able to get her a Merlin pass for a year to go off with her dad and do all the amusements when she was well enough, which is what she wanted. You know, we helped her mum at Christmas with a food voucher to go and take away all the pressure of all the Christmas food shopping. The other mum, you know, she was a single parent, the other mum, whereas the other little girl's mum wasn't. So, you know, that family was like, we'll help that family more because that mum's on her own, you know. And this little girl, we got her pampered, we had nails done, we got all the Christmas food shopping because they were still away having chemotherapy right up until 2 days before Christmas. So it's like, right, let us take the burden from you. You know, we got we got presents for the kids.
I'm listening to you and it just sounds so beautiful. It sounds so healing. It also sounds like, you know, you've come into your own in terms of your own superpower.
Yes, this is where I'm in my happy place. I've always loved helping people. And I'll just retrack a little bit. When I was here in this house in isolation, you know, my grandmother that gave to me my whole childhood, when she needed me, I was there for her for 4 years. I gave up all work and I looked after my grandmother whilst I was experiencing domestic abuse, whilst I had to move out of the area. I travelled back and Since when my grandmother died, I thought, what am I going to do with myself? I'm isolated away from all of my friends and family, and I don't have my grandmother anymore. What am I going to do? And I started doing courses, to help people, because naturally, all I've ever been is a natural born helper. I've known I've needed help in many aspects of my life, but I don't ask for it. I don't let people know that I need help. I never let people know that I'm struggling. I'm always the strong person for you to lean on me, and I'll help you.
Okay, I'm going to push back on here. Okay, because there's a messaging sometimes in society about Black women that you have to be strong, that we don't need any support, we can't always be vulnerable. What is it within you that that you felt that you had to be strong and you wouldn't ask for help? And do you think if you had asked for help, would the course of your life been any different?
Yes, I do. I wouldn't have suffered alone in silence for many years. And I know that if I'd have asked for help, people would have helped me. I know that now.
Yeah.
I didn't know that then. And I think whereas I've stood on my own 2 feet from the age of 15, I've just known nothing else but to be strong, and I'm there, and I've always been doing my own thing, and I've just I have always been the beacon of strength to people. People come to me for advice. People, I help people. I don't want people to know that I suffer. I don't want people to know that I need help. I didn't want people to know, and I ploughed myself into these courses, and, I started thinking, right, what can I do? What can I do? And I thought, I know, every experience I've been through, I'll help other people. So I did drug and alcohol mentoring. I did domestic abuse support. And eventually I got a job with a housing provider where I was helping people in those aspects of life to turn their life around. And I absolutely loved it. Then I got headhunted into the work I do now, like working with more complex needs. And, again, all of my life experiences have made me have the best, I am the best at what I do. I'm always being asked for. People come in and say, oh, can we speak to Hazel? I love my job. I've loved all of the jobs I do helping people. And it stems back as well from running that homeless hotel when I was 17. That moulded my brain into all these jobs, all this work, all this looking after people, sorting out problems, filling in benefit forms, whatever I've done across the board, housing, addiction, everything else. I can honestly say I'm doing it from the heart with a massive passion, and I know what I'm doing because I've been there and I've lived it, and I want to help you because I know what it's like to need that help, and I never had it, because I never asked for it.
Hazel, I've got so many things to kind of want to ask you, and in terms of to explore. But if you needed support now and you wanted something for yourself, what would it be? What would you want?
Wow. Well, I'm single. A nice partner would be nice.
They're always nice.
God can't give it all to me at once. But do you know what I want really? I just want my kids to be happy and healthy. I want to improve every day on the situations that I haven't always been the greatest. I haven't always been the greatest and most present mum. I haven't always been the greatest and most present daughter. I haven't always been the greatest and most present person. But most of all, I haven't always loved myself. And that's that going forward, I don't want to live in my past traumas. They were sent to me for a reason. I've lived them for a reason. I don't need to live in them and dwell on them. I want to make positivity come from them, and that's exactly what I do that's what I love doing with Raving for a Reason. I go out that door and I've got a massive community of people that help me, I really do. And they want to help. The music, it just all comes together. It's not even like I have to search and beg or anything like that. People come to me and say, we'll help. At the moment, we're going to be doing we're getting ready to help anti-knife crime, with the Ben Kensington Trust. We've done various charities, and who knows what's coming next? Who knows what's coming next? It's just exciting. I love it.
Hazel, it sounds so exciting, the work that you're doing, and that the organisation, that you're you've created is growing, and the fact that people trust you and believe not only in the way that you do it, because there's lots of charities out there supporting the community, but there's something about what you're doing that people are connecting with in terms of your human spirit as well. And the journey, we don't have to be perfect. As human beings, we are allowed to make mistakes. Life is messy, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We don't always make the right choices in life.
We don't always make them
in the end, hopefully.
Yeah, that's right. That's correct. And do you know what? For anyone that's been through anything that I've spoken about today, own it. Don't be ashamed of it, because for a lot of time I was ashamed and embarrassed and, never spoke about a lot of things. And, I open up more now because I realise when I speak, it helps someone else. And this is who I am. This is why I do this today, and, today I have a good job. I have this beautiful community, and remember the community aspect of what I do is completely unpaid. It's a non-profit organisation. Totally. It's based on pure love and the want to help others. I've got a full-time job that keeps my financial side up. The rest of it is food, and I've spent hours and hours and hours on Raving for a Reason, on social media, on organising lineups, but I love it. I love every aspect, and anything you do in life, if you're passionate about it, it will work. And that's, I'm a true believer in that. Totally.
Hazel, what would you like to say to your younger self now that you've arrived and you're doing the things that you're doing? Is there anything that you would like to say to your younger self that she needs to know?
You know what? I wouldn't change any of it, because if I did change it, I wouldn't be here today doing what I'm doing, thinking how I'm thinking, talking how I'm talking. But if I was to give a message to a younger person, it would definitely be about drugs, to stay away, if you can, because they're always fun at first, but they end, 90% of people if they were honest about it, would sit there and say, it took them to a dark place. And if your using gets to a point that you once you start you can't stop, or when you're upset, stressed, or whatever, you start picking up a drug, you've got a problem, and you need to address that. And there's many ways you can, but to a younger person, I think that would be my biggest message, and to my younger self, my biggest message, because I think without that in my life, I would have dealt with a lot of things differently. But again, the other big message I've got to any woman or man out there that is in any kind of abusive relationship, please try and speak to somebody in confidence. Not necessarily, no one would expect you to get up and just leave, because I know how hard that is. You don't have to suffer in silence. Please share it with somebody, because for a long time I kept mine secret, and people used to see marks on me, and I used to deny it and make my daughter lie at school, etc., etc. So those are the kind of those are the things that I would send out a strong message about.
Hazel, thank you very much for being curious with Counselling Reflections. I really appreciate your openness and your transparency, and allowing listeners to understand the journey that you've been in. I think you will offer so much more than I could ever imagine what I thought our conversation would be like. So I really appreciate your vulnerability and just your openness about who you are and what you've experienced.
Thank you very much for having me today. It's been a pleasure.